Now, next witness is Mr. MacMillan.
Mr. MacMillan, Lord.
Good afternoon, Mr. MacMillan. As you will understand, you're about to be asked questions by Mr. McKeever, who's sitting opposite you. But first, I understand you're prepared to take the oath.
Yes.
Sitting where you are, could I ask you to raise your right hand and repeat these words after me? I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that I will tell the truth,
that I will tell the truth,
the whole truth,
and
nothing but the truth.
nothing but the truth.
Thank you, Mr. MacMillan. Now, I don't know how long your evidence will be. I would certainly expect it to be finished by about 4 o'clock. However, if at any stage you want to take a break in your evidence, just feel free to give me an indication and we'll take a break. I mean, what I want to be, or what I want to impress on you is that you're in control of this situation. If you want to take a break, we'll take a break. Okay?
Thank you.
Ms. McKeever.
Could you tell the inquiry your name, please?
Melville Russell MacMillan.
What's your occupation?
I'm an operational estates manager at the Queen Elizabeth campus in Glasgow.
How long have you been at the Queen Elizabeth for?
Since November 2014.
Now, you prepared a witness statement for the inquiry, is that right?
Yes.
And are you happy to adopt that statement as your evidence to the inquiry today?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I'll have some questions for you and I might wish to refer to some of your answers in that statement. If I do so, it'll come onto the screen that's immediately in front of you, so you'll be able to read from that. For those operating the screens, Mr. MacMillan was originally within last week's witnesses and therefore his statement's within volume 2 rather than volume 3. I wonder if we might go to that. To start us off, the statement starts at page 267. And at page 268, at question 8, you have set out what your roles were within the Estates Department at the Queen Elizabeth. And they are firstly, from the date told as November 2014 to April 2018, you were Estates Duty Manager. And thereafter, you were Day Shift Operational Estates Manager. And
yes.
Is that the role you're still in today?
Yes, it is.
Do you want to tell me about what those two jobs entail? What roles did they hold?
Well, the Estates Duty Manager was predominantly working on a shift rota on days and nights. And we basically would take calls from the help desk, from the nursing staff, basically on I would call it a firefighting operation, that we would go to these jobs and repair them, fix them as best we could. That's basically for the Estates Duty Manager's job on shifts. My day shift job now, when I started that in 2018 in April, I was given the task of managing the water system in the Queen Elizabeth due to my past experiences.
Right, okay, we'll maybe come on to that because a little bit further down at page 272, you talk a little bit about your past past experience. Question 26 I've got marked, you've set out your qualifications.
Yeah,
You see that, so.
I'm a fully qualified plumber and heating engineer. I've served my time way back in the 1980s. I've done several jobs since then, and I have been back to do further education. I've done an HNC in electronic engineering, and then I was put through my 2 degrees through university, my BEng in building services engineering and then my master's in building services engineering.
Okay, and at 27, just below that, you describe having been an Estates L8 technician plumber at IRH. 2 questions there. L8 is Legionella, is that correct? Where's IRH?
Inverclyde Royal Hospital in Greenock.
In Greenock. Thank you.
Yeah, I worked there previously. I've worked there twice actually. I worked there from 1990 to 1999, and then I moved abroad and I came back in 2008, and I think, if I remember rightly, it was roughly about 2010, 2011, I went back to Inverclyde Royal to work. Basically got my old job back.
So you were a Legionella qualified plumber both
Yeah,
times?
yes. When I went back for the second time to Inverclyde Royal, I predominantly dealt with all the Legionella works, managing a contractor for my manager at the time.
Okay, so you were well familiar with Legionella before you ever reached the Queen Elizabeth?
Yes, I was, yes.
And that's been a theme, would it be fair to say, of your working life there?
Yes, I was a plumbing technician for 10 years, 9 years, and then more predominantly more to do with the LA work, Legionella, when I came back, yeah.
Okay. In the two roles that you talked me through a minute ago, can you tell me how work came to you, how you were allocated tasks?
At the Queen Elizabeth?
Yeah.
Well, in the duty estates manager, once we were on shift, we would basically use the FM First system to see what jobs had been put on the system by nursing staff, etc. And I would allocate those jobs to my shift team. And also we would take emergency phone calls, and I would also issue job lines to my staff on an ad hoc basis when we got the calls in. I would also go with them because I'm very how can you put it? I'm very interested in my job, and I'm interested in how other people's jobs are in the hospital, so I would always go with them to find out how things work.
Okay. And that's duty job, that's the one you described as firefighting?
That's the firefighting job, yeah, because basically that's what we were doing, firefighting every time we were on shift.
Does that mean there was no rhyme or reason to it? You
just didn't know what you were going to get. Yeah. We as shift duty shift managers, there was 5 of us. We basically made up with the lack of PPM system. We basically made up our own checks that we would all carry out on the start of our shifts.
Tell me about that. Sorry, you're saying the lack of a PPM system?
We didn't have a full PPM system when the hospital opened.
PPM is planned preventative maintenance.
Yes. Right. So my understanding was that in a new hospital it would all have been populated, and we would have been working through them or through that system. But that didn't seem to be the case. We made up our own at times. Medical gas, electrical checks. There was certain checks we'd done during the night, filtration system for the water, etc.
So what periods are we talking about here?
Well, this would be when I was on shifts.
This is
probably the first year or so, maybe.
Right, so that would be maybe from around the end of 2014 to around the end of 2015, would that be fair?
No, I can't quite remember when I started on my shifts. I started on my shift pattern after the hospital opened.
Right,
so it would be later on in 2015, nearer into 2016 would have been, and we kept those checks up for the whole time that I was a estates duty manager.
Right, so this is a period when patients were in. So if patients arrived in April, say, of 2015, it would be maybe April to April that you're talking about?
Probably, yeah.
Right. And I think you said you'd have expected there to be a PPM system.
Yeah, I would expect it to be as part of the delivery from the contractor.
The FM First system that you told me about that you were getting jobs sent to you on, was that an electronic system?
Yes.
And did that work off kind of handheld?
Yes,
pages,
our technicians would be issued the jobs, and it would go down to what we call PDAs. And then they would work on their PDAs and take the jobs from their PDAs, do the jobs, complete, and then send them back. And then there'd be a record that the job's been done.
So where was your role in that kind of network?
My role would be to issue the jobs to our technicians. And obviously, I would go on the system and check the job to see if what works had came in. You prioritise the works.
Okay.
There'd be some that could wait. Other works you would do immediately.
How would you know how to prioritise things?
You would pick by your experience.
Right, so that you're talking about jobs coming to you. Is this all firefighting jobs that you're talking about?
Quite a few at the beginning, yes.
The PPM jobs, though, they're different.
They are different. They are automatically issued to technicians,
right?
On certain dates, etc. I'm not. They're programmed by another team.
Was that happening in April 2015?
I can't remember. I honestly don't think so. No, I don't think there was a PPM system in place at that point.
Right. So you said you had to improvise.
Yes, we improvised. So we picked what we thought were critical items. So we would go on and we would give job lines out for medical gas to check the medical gas systems on the site.
So where did you find these jobs? How would you know a job needed to be done at all?
Well, we decided between the five of us, basically, and I'm not sure if there was a senior manager involved with what we picked to what we thought were critical. Medical gas is critical, so we would get that checked once a night. It's the same with we would check air handling units, i.e. via the BMS. And if there's anything wrong, we would issue a job to our technician on shift to go and look at it, to fix it, repair it.
And you're saying that there was nothing indicating, you weren't alerted or told that there was anything in those systems that needed to be done. It was reliant upon you identifying it yourselves.
I think, as I say, between the five of us, we made up a plan of this is what we will look at. I can't remember if there was a senior manager involved who would have gave us information like that. I just remember that we had like 2 check sheets beside us, and we would go through them during the night and on day shift to make sure they were complete.
Where did these checklists come from?
Well, they were somebody made them up. As I said, it was probably one of the five of us that wrote them up.
You don't think that this was completed centrally, or?
I don't think so.
Right.
I can't quite remember, to tell you the truth.
Okay. But presumably, if it was compiled by the five of you, then it was reliant upon the five of you's experience and knowledge of what you were dealing with.
Yes.
And for you, that would be primarily plumbing, is that right?
Yes. Primarily for me, it would be the filtration units to ensure that they were running and that the water system was, like the tanks were full, etc. Then we never ran out of water.
Okay, thank you. I'll maybe come back to that shortly. But we just talked about your background being plumbing and heating. In fact, on the same pages we've already got up, you see question 28 was a question about training.
Yep.
And there are 3 parts to the question. Did you have any formal training or qualifications in respect to water? And you detail those. And then ventilation and infection control. And for those ones you don't have any formal training. I think you've probably told us enough about your water training, unless there's anything that you feel you need to add to what you've told me already and what's written here. And just to be clear, these answers, are you talking, is that the training that you've had before you ever arrived at the Queen Elizabeth?
The L8 training was when I was a technician plumber at Inverclyde Royal Hospital. That's at a CP course, a Setting Guild CP course.
And in fact, if we flick over to the next page, at the top, you have set out your courses that have got you there.
Yeah.
On the last sentence there, I worked on all systems, mechanical, electrical on Queen Elizabeth campus due to past work experience and qualifications. you want to explain to me what you mean by that, past experience and qualifications for mechanical and electrical, as opposed to the plumbing that you've already told me about?
When I emigrated to Canada and worked in Canada for 10 years, and I worked for 2 years for a industrial heat treat company, and I was a commissioning engineer with them, and that involved gas, mechanical piping and electrical systems.
Okay.
And I worked for a company for 5 years on hydrogen generation units. I worked in their research and development as a senior technician.
Okay, so you've set out in the statement your water plumbing qualifications, but there's actually more to you than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I'm interested in the next couple of answers because it's answer 30, you're saying the training, you're asked about whether you knew if appropriate training was in place for staff on using the new systems in the hospital. And you've said the training received was minimal, just a rough description of how the systems worked. Training sessions were held and staff were told to attend as per a training schedule. Excuse me. Firstly, who are you talking about there when you're referring to staff attending training?
There was the 5 managers, 5 duty estates managers, and there was some technicians that started with the shift managers.
When you say technicians, are these the people who were doing the work that were effectively under you, is that right?
Yes, right. Yes, they're multi-skilled trade technicians, and some of them came from the Southern General and some came from, if I remember rightly, the Western, because it was Western was moving over. So we had some technicians with the 5 managers, and we would go to these meetings, some training to do with water, ventilation, Schneider electrics, etc. It was just a general, to me it was just a general overlook of what was put into the hospital. And then, because you would go and then you signed your name and it was ticked off to say that you'd attended. These were organised by the NHS and Brookfield.
Was that enough was it enough training that you received now you look back on it?
I wouldn't say so, no. I said it was, no, it wasn't enough, no.
Now, it may be that you've already answered this or part answered it, but when you were doing, in those first years, when you were doing the shift work and the firefighting role, as you put it, were you operating as a specialist in what you were doing, or were you simply doing whatever arose, and that could be anything?
No, I wasn't operating in the job that I do now. I was doing basically all trades.
Right. So some of that would have been water, some of it would have been
heating, chilled system, not so much electrical because I don't have an electrical bias. My bias is mechanical, but I did, out of interest, follow the electricians around to find out how systems worked, etc. Because I felt being a manager, you need to know these things.
And the training that you had on those things.
The training, yes, well, especially because with my work abroad, I worked with electrical.
Right, but the training that you'd had wasn't enough.
No, not the training that we had from Brookfield, etc. No.
Right, can you recall what training you might have had on ventilation at that time?
If I remember rightly, it was just a general 4 hours of this is an air handling unit, this is what it does, etc., etc. There wasn't really much else.
Okay. Give me a second. And 2 pages further on, at the bottom, you've got question 37, which was asking whether you'd worked on a large-scale water or ventilation system before. Now, the reason for that question is obviously because the Queen Elizabeth is the largest of the water and ventilation systems. And you've said that the Inverclyde had similar but smaller systems. How did they compare? Are we talking much smaller? Are we talking systems that were essentially the same but they were a bit bigger, or were they different in nature?
No, both systems, obviously the Queen Elizabeth system is a lot bigger, extremely big, but they both had roughly the same equipment. They had filtration units, they had boosted pump sets, they had raw tanks, and they had filtration tanks. Inverclyde was just such a really small scale compared to the Queen Elizabeth.
Right, so when you arrived at the Queen Elizabeth, did you, and I'm specifically asking about water, but did you effectively arrive pre-trained? Or to put it another way, were you content that you knew enough to deal with water systems at the Queen Elizabeth?
Yes, I felt because I'd done it at Inverclyde Royal for 3 to 4 years. I used to look after the filtration units, and I would, as I said before, I would deal with contractors, L8 contractors. Can't remember the name of the company now, but it's basically the same as what DMA Canyon do. I would work with them on a far smaller scale because the hospital was a lot smaller.
Right, so that might be true for the water system, but in terms of the electrical system or whatever else, would you say that you came pre-trained, or is that just not?
The electrical, yes, you're correct. The electrical system I wasn't trained in. There's certain standards, etc. you have to be an electrician. I wasn't trained to be an electrician, but when it came to the heating, etc., and the chilled water, I've had a fair knowledge of how those systems worked.
Right, but another way of asking the question would be for me to say that when you think about the systems at Queen Elizabeth that you encountered when you arrived, on which of the systems were you content that you were fully trained?
The water system, and I would say the heating system as well.
Okay, and for the other systems, electrical, ventilation, whatever else, you would have required further training?
Yes.
Yes. Now, a page or two further on, the next page, question 42. This is a section dealing with handover. So this is right at the start of your period at Queen Elizabeth. And the date there is handover date, 26 January 2015. And at that time, you were in Estates Duty Manager. Now, you mentioned there at question A that what was your initial instruction in respect to the state of the campus? And your initial instruction was it was fit for purpose. How was that communicated to you?
I don't really understand that question, to tell you the truth.
The question as it's written, or the question I just asked?
No, yeah, I don't understand. I can't remember why I answered it that way.
Right, well, perhaps if I just ask you a different question then, what was your initial impression of the Queen Elizabeth once you arrived?
It wasn't finished.
Do you want to elaborate on that? Why do you say that?
We still had 250 contractors on site every day that we had to sign in and out to complete the works.
And when you talk about completing the works, do you want to give me a taster of what those works were?
Oh, there was theatre lighting that was getting finished off. There was just, I honestly I couldn't say. There was just so much that needed done. There was a lot needing done when we moved in.
Busy times for you then?
Yes.
How was the workload?
it was extremely strenuous and long.
And that was the date given there was the end of January. How long did it go on like that for?
It didn't actually stop probably until we went on to our shift pattern.
4 years later?
No, our shift pattern, which would probably have been sometime after the hospital opened in 2015. That's when we started on shifts. From November 2014 up until the point of going on to shifts, we were on day shift.
Okay.
And once the hospital opened, we went on to our shifts, but the day shift guys had to pick up the supervisors, etc., signing in the contractors, because they were still coming into the hospital to do works. I wasn't involved so much in daily works because I was on shift. My job totally changed.
Right, so I understand it. So there was a period when you arrived in November 2014 for a couple of months when
Yes.
you were doing days.
Yes.
Heavy
Yes.
workload.
Very heavy, aye.
Then you went on to shifts.
And it was still heavy. It was still, you started at 7, finished at 7, but sometimes I wouldn't get home till 9, half 9 at night, or 9, half 9 in the morning, because you stayed back because you had to get Handover.
Yeah. And you did that for a number of years.
Done that for,
yeah.
I was on shifts for about 3.5 years, I think it was.
Okay, so, but there was a difference in workload, you're saying, between the initial couple of months of very heavy strain and then
Yes.
still heavy workloads, but less strain?
No, it's always strain when you work at the Queen Elizabeth. It's the same now. It's just different. I don't know if you get used to it or, but it's a fast-paced environment to work in.
Okay, so just thinking about those first 2 periods, the 2 months when you're on days and the period afterwards where you move on to shifts. You mentioned firefighting, which I'd understood to be the shifts period. Was the first couple of months, were they also firefighting, or was that more structured?
No, it was the same. It was the same. I was predominantly, I can remember, dealing with the drains in the hospital, the outside drains.
Okay, do you want to give me a taste of what that job was, what that meant?
Yeah, there'd be, we would get reports that toilets were backing up on the ground floor, and we would go lift manholes and find the manholes to be full of sewage. We would lift manholes outside, and I'll say now we were very lucky because we had a chap from Brookfield. I think his name was Kevin McGuinness. No, it rings a bell. He was the outside manager to do with the groundworks, and him and one of his colleagues were very, very helpful with it, to us and with us, in sorting out all these problems. We found workmen's safety hats, bits of 4x2, bricks, Coke bottles, balloons to test the drains, all in drains. And this is what caused all the blockages.
Right, so blockage and backing up from as soon as you got there.
Yes.
And
Spent a lot of time doing that.
And that was coming into the hospital itself. It wasn't just external drains.
If they're blocked up outside, it backs up inside. Yeah.
Okay. The hospital became open to the public around the end of, I think it might be May 2015. Did it appear to you, after you'd been there a few months, that it was a hospital that was ready to receive patients?
I wouldn't say so with the amount of contractors that were still coming in the building. It looked, on the out, if you were to look at it and not in depth, it looked as if it was finished. But behind the scenes, there was things missing, things that were still having to be done.
Can you give me a flavour of that? What sort of things were doing missing?
For example, there was one day, a colleague and I went into one of the theatres in the adults, and we were told that the lights weren't working. And my colleague was an electrical technician, and we went in above the ceiling in the theatre, and there was no cabling for the lights. There's no cabling, there's no cables in.
Can you remember when that was?
That would be at the start, the very start. You know, that very early period.
Okay, so that's certainly before you had patients around.
Yes, it would have been. It would have been. But I think that was, if I remember rightly, that was raised by clinical staff at the time.
Okay. Right, a different angle on the handover periods now. There was, you're familiar, you mentioned DMA Canyon yourself earlier. You know that they did a risk assessment, L8 risk assessment in April or May of 2015.
I do know that. I didn't know at the time.
Well, it's the, if we move on to page 279, there's the section of your answers that we're dealing with that. So you say here that you first became aware of it in 2015.
Yes.
And it was Ian Powdery made you aware of it, and you didn't know why there hadn't been a risk assessment prior to handover. Can I ask you, when you say that you first became aware of the report in 2015, what do you mean? Did you see it? Did you read it?
No. In my statement, I say that I seen I was in a meeting regarding the risk assessment. That's not strictly true. What happened was Jim Guthrie and I were called into a meeting, and it was with DMA Canyon and Ian, David and Alan McRobbie, I think it was. This meeting, I got confused with the final meeting of the handover of the 2015 risk assessment.
Right, okay, well, are you able to, can you recall dates when this might have been?
No, I remember that the meeting, Jim and I were called to the meeting by Ian, just by a phone call when we went down, and the meeting was to instruct Jim and I and one of our plumbing technicians to assist DMA Canyon around the building when they were completing their risk assessment. At the time, I didn't really know the whole ins and outs of that, what this risk assessment. And there was another meeting after that, but I did not attend it. And Jim Guthrie and I believe David Bratty attended a meeting with Ian and DMA Canyon regarding the risk assessment. But I was on shifts at that point. I think I was on shifts, but I didn't go to that meeting. I didn't fully know about it and read it until 2018.
Right. So the meeting that you did attend, which was to accompany DMA around the building so they could
Yes.
complete the 2015 risk assessment, you don't recall when that would have been?
Can't remember the meeting, but it was before they'd actually completed the 2015 risk assessment.
If you think about your working patterns at the time, would you have been on shifts then, or would
No, not then. Sorry, I was on day shift because I was dealing, and I remember I was helping Tommy Romeo with the medical gas, the purging of the gas, and I was also instructed to. There was a banister that needed altered so that children wouldn't climb on it and fall over glass. I was instructed to do that, and I remember that being we spoke about that at the meeting as well at that time.
Right, so if it was within your day pattern, then does that place it in November or December or January?
It would have been probably November. I'm guessing November, December at some point before 2015. I'm not really sure.
Okay, I wonder if we could perhaps get the front page of the risk assessment up, which ought to be at bundle 6, page 122. Could we see the next page, please? And the page after that. No, I wondered if there might be dates, a list of dates that you could comment on there, but there's not, so we can go back to the statement, please. Now, you started off by saying that it wasn't accurate to say that you saw the report at that time.
Yes.
What did you mean when you said that you saw it? Does that were you simply referring to the fact you were involved in some process that
Yes.
ended up with
Yes.
the report?
Yeah, that's true.
And you mentioned that it was handed over at a later meeting.
I get David Watson from DMA told me that it had been handed over.
So is your position then that you never actually saw the report until much later?
I didn't see it until much later, no.
And I think you said that was 2018.
That was when that's when I went on to day shift.
Okay. And when you saw it then, did you get a chance to read it properly?
Yes, I read through it, but there was also another couple of risk assessments had been done as well at that point.
Yep, I wonder if we might have one of them in front of us. If we have it, we may not. No, it's fine. Instead, page 281. At the top of the page here is a reference to 2017 DMA Canyon report. And you're asked, first question there, you're asked when you first became aware of that report, and you say 2018 to 2019. Would that have been the same time as you became aware of the 2015 report?
It was probably around about the same time, yes.
You say it was Colin Purdon who showed you the report, and you say in the third question there, C, you don't know what works, if any, that had been recommended in 2015 were carried out prior to the 2017 report.
Yeah, I wouldn't know that because I was on shifts.
Right, explain to me that answer. Why wouldn't you have known?
Because I worked shifts.
Which meant that
I wasn't involved with the daily running of the water system. There wasn't. I remember that Jim Guthrie came off shifts and went on to work on water and ventilation, and then Jim left, and then Tommy Romeo came off shift and went on to day shift to do water and ventilation, and then Tommy left, and then I was taken off shifts, but I didn't ask to be taken off shifts. I was actually told that I was getting taken off shifts to do day shift, and that's the job that I was handed in 2018.
Okay, so when you say you're on shifts, you've told us that's the firefighting job.
Yes.
And some of those firefighting jobs would have been water, is that right?
Yeah, filtration units, etc., tanks, burst pipes.
But there are water tasks that come to you if you're on shifts because something's gone wrong today.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. Whereas remedial works that are putting right things that have been identified in risk assessments, where do they go? Who does those?
I would assume that it would have been the day shift manager in charge of the water.
And so when you make your way to doing day shifts in 2018, is that the kind of work that you are involved in doing, allocating, being tasked with?
Yes.
But it wasn't until 2018 that...
Yes, it wasn't until 2018. I came off shifts on the 15th of April 2018, became an AP in June 2018, and basically that's when I started working with Kerr Clarkson on the 2018/19 risk assessment to get all the actions completed.
Right. You mentioned there being appointed AP, that's authorised person.
Yes.
Do you want to tell me about that role? What does it entail?
The authorised person manages in that case it would be the water system for the hospital, to ensure that it's compliant and that you are completing the tasks that the SHTM set down for maintenance, etc.
When were you appointed AP?
I was appointed in June 2018 by Alan Gallagher. I'm almost sure it was June 2018.
How did the appointment come about?
Because I was moved from shift onto day shift.
Did you have to do anything, any training or?
Yeah, I had to sit a course. You sit a week-long course by an independent contractor. And then once you've sat the course, it's a second guilds course, you have to pass it. Once you've passed it, you have an interview with the authorising engineer, and if you satisfy the authorising engineer that you're capable to do the job, he then recommends you to, in this case it would be Alan Gallagher, to appoint you as an AP for that system. It's the same for all systems. It's
Okay.
just different
And in
A's.
actual fact, you became AP for something else in 2020.
Well, yes, I was I am an AP for ventilation, I'm an AP for medical gas, and I'm an AP for water. But before that, I was an AP for HV,
What's HV?
high voltage.
What are the dates for these appointments? Sorry. You've told us already June 2018.
Yeah,
for water.
my appointment for the HV was before that. It would be when we started, it was maybe 2016. It's a 2-week course you go on down to Leeds. And I subsequently done the, 3 years later, I'd done the refresher course.
Okay. And gas would have been when?
Oh, medical gas would have been also, it would have been roughly 2018-19. I can't quite remember. It was when I came off shifts.
Right, and ventilation was the last.
And ventilation was the last one, yes.
Okay, and you mentioned having done training and been assessed, and that would have been by Dennis Kelly. Would that have been right?
For the water, yes.
Yes, for the water. Sorry, that's the one I'm interested in at the moment. Do you know who held that role before you, if anyone?
For an AP?
AP for water.
No. I know Tommy Romeo was not an AP for water.
Yep.
I'm not sure about Jim. Jim did work on the old site. I don't know if he was an AP. I couldn't answer that.
Now, it's been suggested, I think, to us that nobody had held the AP for water role before you.
Not that I know of.
Was that discussed at all at the time that you were appointed?
No, I can't remember, no. I don't really know.
Well, discussed with you. Did anybody raise?
No,
Raise that?
I was just asked to, I was just told I was going on the AP for water course. And because that was going to be predominantly my focus on work, that was what I would do.
The process that you described for becoming AP for water, when you became AP for ventilation in 2020, was it a similar process?
It's a similar process. It's you sit a course, you go through the AE will interview you, and then you'll get, it's up to the AE to put you forward, recommend you to, and again it'd be Alan Gallagher, who is send you a letter in writing.
Okay. Now, you've told us, I think, going by the dates, that your appointment as AP happened around the same time as you shifted from shifts on to day work.
Yes.
And in fact, it may have been because of that.
I think so, yeah. I think that's why I was moved over.
Right, so it follows from that you were doing different work because you changed jobs, but you weren't necessarily doing different work because you'd become an authorised person.
My focus shifted to the water system. Then it was different from when I worked on shifts.
Yes.
Yeah, my focus was more on the water system.
And what's the practical significance of becoming an authorised person?
Practical significance?
Do you take on a different role?
Yeah, well, you do, yeah. I mean, if I'm AP for water, as I said, I deal with I'm not the only one, but I deal with the water systems to ensure that they are compliant under the SHTMs. You know, tank cleaning, chlorifier cleaning, making sure they get done every year, making sure there's a quarterly, get the quarterlies get done, your TMTs get serviced, etc. Things like that.
So there's a role that carries some responsibility with it.
Absolutely.
Right, and you might or might not be in a position to answer my next question because your appointment came at the same time as you changed roles. Or there may be a lag, I don't know, you tell me. But the tasks that you would carry out as an AP, were they different tasks from the ones that you would have carried out had you not been an AP?
Yes, because I believe I was specifically taken off shifts to do the job of AP for water at the hospital. That's what I believe, because of my background.
So you mentioned Tommy Romeo earlier, and that he was dissatisfied at the idea that he might be AP, appointed AP or asked to do AP work. Were you aware, and you may not be able to answer this, but are you aware of what tasks he was carrying out at the time that he was not an AP for water?
No, I wasn't aware at the time, but it became apparent to me once I took over from Tommy, what Tommy was trying to do. And he did try to get the scheduled tasks completed.
And in your view, bearing in mind that you're qualified and appointed as AP by that point, the tasks that Tommy had been left with, were the tasks that were appropriate to be left with him, given that he wasn't an AP?
Well, as I stated earlier, Jim Guthrie was doing the day job as water. I don't know if he was an AP, but Jim's background is the same as mine. So Jim, I believe, had put in place parts of the SHTM that have to be done: shower cleaning, shower head cleaning, etc. Flushing, low use outlets, etc. And Tommy inherited that from Jim. So that's what Tommy inherited, basically.
And was it right that he inherited that when he wasn't an AP for water?
In my personal opinion, no. I think it was. I don't think it was fair on Tommy. Tommy was an electrical background, not a mechanical background.
Yeah, and that's one aspect of the answer, not fair on Tommy. The other side of it, is it fair on the Queen Elizabeth or on users of the water system to have somebody who's not an AP carrying out those tasks?
No, there should have, in my opinion, there should have been an AP in place from the beginning.
Just give me a moment, please. I may be getting mixed up, but correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you told me that the role of AP is to manage the water system. Was that, that may or may not have been your words, but is that a fair description of the role?
Yes.
Before you started doing that role in the middle of 2018, who was responsible for managing the water system?
Specifically before me?
Before you.
It would be Tommy.
Does it follow from that that we can definitely say that Tommy was fulfilling a function that he shouldn't have been doing, or that shouldn't have been left to him?
I would say so.
Now, we covered the 2015 and the 2017 DMA reports, and I think you said you did have a chance to read them when you saw them in 2018, perhaps. Looking back, and bear in mind, I think you would have become an AP at the time that you read them. That would all have gone hand in hand, is that right?
Yep, I'd say so.
When you read those, what were your impressions?
There was a lot. There was a lot of reds, as we call them. You know, it's the traffic light system. A lot of them were temperature issues, which I think sometimes it's a bit unfair in a risk assessment because it's a moment in time. It's a snapshot. There could have been a problem with the heating system that day, and that, as the risk assessor goes round, takes a temperature and says temperature's low, etc. There was a lot of there was a lot of actions to be taken.
Specifically asking you about when you read the 2015 report and then you read the 2017 report, would it be fair in saying that the 2017 report had identified a lot of the same issues from the 2015 report that hadn't been fixed?
Yes, because nobody worked on the 2015 risk assessment.
What's your view on that?
If there was an AP in place, it would have been worked upon. But I don't know why any actions in the 2015 risk assessment were not acted upon.
Because you were engaged in other things at the time, is that?
I was, yes. I wasn't involved because I was working shifts. I dealt with all systems at that point, not a specific. If you're an AP, you deal with a specific system. There was no AP, so you didn't deal with a specific one system. We were all HV APs, all of us. Plumbers, electrical guys, that's what was asked of us to do. We were never asked to do any other AP duties. Never, until, as I said, until I came on shifts. Oh, sorry, when I came off shift, I completed other AP duties at the time, and I took the responsibility of the water system at the Queen Elizabeth on.
As part of that responsibility, did you take on tasks that were outstanding from the 2017 report?
No, because there was a 2018 risk assessment that was in the process. I can't remember if it was in the process or if it had already been done. And I asked the question to Colin Purden and Andy Wilson, why go back to 2015? You're talking 3 years ago when, again, say example, temperatures. The temperatures won't be there anymore. They'll have changed. So I said, if we work through the 2018-19 risk assessment, we will probably wipe out 2017 and 2015, a fair chunk of the risk assessment. Because, as you said, if in the 2017 risk assessment, there's things still there from 2015, well, if it's not been worked on, it'll still be there in 2018, 2019.
And you said, I think, that, stop me if I'm putting words in your mouth, but I took from what you said that the reason why the gaps in the 2015 risk assessment weren't worked on was because there was no authorised person for water. in place?
There was no authorised person for water in place, but whoever had the 2015 risk assessment never allocated the work to an individual to go ahead with the remedials of that.
Well, what ought to have happened?
I would have thought that it would have been handed to a junior manager to complete the actions. I don't know why I do not know why that risk assessment was never looked at. I can't answer that question. All I know is what I done from 2018 onwards.
How surprised were you when you learned all this?
It did come as a surprise, but it didn't really.
Shocked? Is that?
I was shocked, but it kind of didn't really as well.
Explain that to me.
Well, I mean, Ian Powrie always handed the work out. He was always the guy that, he was the boss. I don't know if he never worked on it. I don't know. As I said, all I can say is when I took over in 2018, I tried my best to do the best to get it compliant with Kerr Clarkson. Kerr and I both worked hard, and we completed the 2018-2019 risk assessment. We completed all parts. We've done all remedials.
When you picked this up in 2018, I mean, you mentioned you were surprised, a bit shocked. Were you able to form a view as to whether you were dealing with a safe water system at that point?
I didn't look at it that way. I just, as I said, I was given the 2018 risk assessment not long after it, and I just set about. My work was focused on the 2018-2019 risk assessment for the site, for the Queen Elizabeth and the Royal Hospital for Children. That was my direct focus for quite a while.
And over the years you've been working on that task, have you made progress?
Yeah, we made progress very quickly. I decided that I needed two technicians to work for me alone, 2 plumbing technicians.
How did you go about securing that?
I asked if I could have 2 technicians and I got told no.
Who did you ask?
I can't remember, to tell you the truth. I'm being honest, I get told, I can't remember who I asked. It was in a conversation, and I get told no, that wouldn't be possible because we need the plumbers, obviously, for our normal day-to-day works, etc. And
Were you specifically saying I need 2 technicians for
L8 works? And what I done was I went and approached 2 of the plumbers that I knew, very clever, and I asked them if they would. I took them for a coffee and I asked them if they would like to do the job. I basically tried to sell them my old job, but I'd done it in Inverclyde Royal. And they
are these people who are already working?
Yeah, these are technician plumbers who are CP'd for the hospital. One of them knows the retained site and knew the Queen Elizabeth and the kids, and the other chap, both of them actually worked in the Old Southern. So I took them for a coffee. I asked them, pleaded my case with them. They said no. They came back to me 3 weeks later and asked me if the job was still open. I said there wasn't really a job as such, as in an official job. I said, but I would like you to try it for 6 months. And they've been doing it ever since. And they have their own work. They have their full control of what they do.
Who are they? What's their names?
Martin Ingalls and Mark McAnally are my 2 LA technicians. They have their own office, they have their own computers, they have everything they need to complete all works that we require them to do, ask them to do.
They're still there and they've been doing that ever since.
Absolutely, and I couldn't do my job. I couldn't do my job without the 2 of them.
Now, we skipped forward a little bit there because you initially started off by telling me about a meeting where you were rebuffed, I think.
Yeah, I can't remember who. I honestly can't remember who it was. I'm not sure if I tried it on as a tongue in cheek, but I did ask, and I was told, well, no, because we need all plumbers, etc. But I managed to sneak them under the radar, and they've been doing it ever since.
How did you do that?
I just told them. As I said, I explained. I asked the two guys if they would do it, and I went into the supervisor's office when the both lads said they would do it. I went into the supervisor's office and I told the supervisors, do not give them any work. Don't give them any, emergency works. I said give them emergency works if it's a total emergency, but don't give them any normal works on their PDAs because they're working for me from now on. And that's stuck ever since. And I'm very fortunate that was allowed, that it wasn't stopped.
Just for my note, Mr. MacMillan, Mark McAnally was one of these two.
Yes.
The other one was
Martin Ingalls.
Martin Ingalls.
Yes.
Thank you.
There are a few specific events I'd like to ask you about. First of those will be a few pages further on at page 294. Question 94 there is describing your answer is describing a bypass pipe.
Yeah.
Now you're mentioning discovering a connection from Hardgate water main to after the booster pumps, bypassing the filtration units and the water tanks. When you say after the booster pumps, what do you mean?
So the water comes into what we call raw tanks, goes through the filtration units, goes into what we call the filtrate tanks. It then leaves the filtrate tanks and goes into two booster sets, which is two sets of pumps. One does the children's hospital, one does the adults hospital, and they're separated in the middle. It was one of the legs going up from the booster set that this pipe was connected to. So it's after the boosted set.
After the boosted set and after the tanks?
Yes.
Does it follow, are there tanks after this connection as well?
No. So, in my mind's eye, what I thought was the water is getting filled up, the system's getting filled up from Hargate Road, bypassing our filtration units. But the water will only go roughly 4 floors because of the pressure of the water main. It'll only go up a certain height. So, possibly filled up the children's hospital, but would maybe only go to about the 3rd or 4th floor in the adults. I don't know how it baffles me to this day. They must have filled up the filtration tanks and then boosted the water up to the higher level.
Okay.
But I can't say that that's what they actually done. But Jim and I found that connection, and it was live. It was at the time.
When did you find it?
It was I can't remember the date, but it was a Friday afternoon, and we went back to report to Ian regarding this pipe that we'd found in the basement. I think it was one of our Jim and I's walk rounds because we all went for a walk every day when we started round the building. You know, you would go into plant rooms, you would go and visit wards, you would try and get up where equipment was, where all your services were running, etc., etc. But we're trying to familiarise ourselves with the hospital.
Well, just to get the picture clear in my mind, then I'll perhaps let you run on too far ahead of me. When you say a bypass pipe, should I have a picture in my mind of a metal pipe, or is it a hose, or what does it look like?
When I talk about the bypass between the two, are you referring to the pump sets?
I'm referring to whatever it was that's
Right.
connected from the mains into after the booster pumps.
No, it's not a bypass as such. It's been bypassed.
Explain.
So what they've done is they have bypassed the filtration units the filtrate tanks and went straight into the riser, a riser going up the building. So it's not a bypass as a technical term. It's been bypassed.
Please don't assume that I know technical terms.
Sorry.
So,
Sorry.
no, not at all. But you're making a distinction between one kind of bypass and another.
Yes, like the bypass between the two boosted pump sets is as we call it, a spool piece. It's a stainless steel pipe, 2 flanges. Now, the reason that's there, that's a bypass. It's if, for example, say the adults boosted set fails and we can't get it on, what we do is we open that bypass and we can turn the pressure up on the other boosted set, which will supply the adults and children at the same time, and vice versa with the adult set. That's a bypass.
So that would be to bypass a faulty piece of equipment in order to make the system work properly by diverting double effectively through another piece of equipment.
It's redundancy. It's redundancy, that's what it is.
Right, and that would be a built-in feature of a system in order to give it spare capacity.
And there's another bypass built into the there's 4 filtration tanks, and there's a bypass between 2 and 2. So
if 2 of them go offline.
Yeah, exactly. Then you can open the bypass and you can supply it with the other 2 tanks. Yeah.
Right, but the bypass you saw, the quotes bypass that you saw, wasn't like that.
No, that was just a 2-inch alkathene tube or pipe going from a connection on Hardgate Road right across the plant room and then into another pipe, a riser pipe that goes up the building. I can't remember which pipe it would be. There's like 4 or 5 of them go up the building. I can't remember where it would go. It's
effectively a way for the building to run directly off the mains.
Basically, what they were doing, they were filling that part of the building up off the mains.
When you say filling it up, you're meaning that the taps can work off it rather than filling it.
Yes, but only to a certain height, as I said, because the mains water will only go a certain height. That's why you've got boosted sets to take them to the 12th floor, because your water main will only go maybe up to the 4th floor.
Okay. So it may be within that answer, but my question was going to be, what struck you as significant about that?
It shouldn't have been connected in the first place.
Because?
Because it was bypassing the filtration tanks. So you're basically putting Scottish Water, mains water, straight into the hospital system. So it wasn't being filtered. So you're possibly seeding the system.
And when you say seeding the system, can you explain that to me?
There's Scottish Water, the water isn't exactly the cleanest, believe it or not. It looks clean. It's just particulate, etc. There could be microorganisms in it as well. It passes all tests for Scottish Water, which is fine, potable, wholesome drinking water. But we're putting it into a hospital system, which should be put through a filtration unit down to 0.2 micron, which takes everything out.
And the reason for that high standard is because of...
Because it's in a hospital, a clinical building.
And the reason for that presumably is because of immune systems and so on that you find in hospital.
Yeah. You want to try and keep your system as clean as possible.
Right, so this wasn't like the proper bypasses that you're describing, whereby a faulty bit of equipment can be compensated for by turning up other bits of equipment. This is just taking certain bits of equipment out of the loop entirely.
You would never do that. You would never do that. You would never pipe it up like that.
Can you, I think you may have answered this already, but can you explain why this might have been done?
Why it was done? I think it was to fill certain parts of the hospital up. I think that's why they done it. There's no other reason why they would have it.
Is it something to do with the pressure available? I mean, presumably you could fill up the hospital if the water goes through the filtered tanks.
Yes.
I'm guessing, because I simply don't know, if you bypass the filtered tanks, do you get the benefit of the mains pressure, or is there any obvious advantage in doing what you found had been done?
No.
No advantage.
The, the only thing that I can see is they were trying to fill up a part of the system by bypassing the filtration units, and I don't know why. They can only fill it up, as I said, it's roughly one bar is 10 metres height. So your 3.5 bar will be 35 metres, 40 metres, say. So you're only going to go 40 metres in the air with that pipework, where the water will go and then it will just stop. So they've only filled it up X height on the opposite side of the booster. You cannot turn the booster pumps on, because if you do, you won't do anything. You won't do anything. It'll not do anything. It won't work. It's impossible. You need the tanks, the filtration tank water, to be going through the boosted set, because it's a sealed system. You turn the pumps on because you're sitting at 0 bar. As soon as you turn the pumps on, you set them and they'll put it up 7.5 bar. 7.5 bar will take you X distance and that'll fill the system up.
Effectively, if it's coming in the bypass at 3.5 bar,
Yes.
then you can't, the closed system in quotes, becomes 3.5 bar max.
Yes, you can't fill it
So
up.
the booster couldn't do anything to that.
No, you can't. You can't. You wouldn't be able to turn the boosters on.
And you simply can't explain why anyone would have thought that was a good idea.
No, I can't explain why that would be. It wasn't a good idea, but I don't know why it was done. I can't explain that.
Okay. Well, in any event, you said, I think you reported it to Ian Powry.
Yes.
Then what happened?
Jim and I, if I remember rightly, Jim and I were back in on the Monday morning. We weren't working the Saturday, Sunday that weekend. And when we went back down to the tank room, the pipe work was gone. So the blue alkathene pipe was gone, and it was, if I remember rightly, it was coiled up in that plant room. It was just sitting coiled up.
Did you ever find out how that came about?
No. But Jim and I just thought that Ian had contacted Brookfield. This is what we thought, and that Ian had went ahead and got it removed.
Okay. Now, number of pages further on at page 300, there should be question 110. Another issue this time, the water tanks are involved. You're asked about debris, including sponges being found in the water tanks, and asked about the significance of it. And this overlaps a little bit, your answer here, with what you've just told me. You said possible contamination. However, these were found in the raw water tanks, which are before the filtration units. The purpose of the filtration unit is to remove any microorganisms to 0.2 microns in case the water, in this case, the water would be safe. The scenario you're describing there is where filtration is working properly, everything's hooked up properly. Possible contamination will be dealt with by filtration. Is that right?
Yes.
However, the scenario that you described with the bypass pipe was one where we know that at least for some time in the hospital's life, the filtration units had been taken out of the equation.
Yes.
So does it follow from that it's not inconceivable that debris, such as the sponges found in the water tanks, could be a source of contamination for the hospital?
No, they can't, because they're in the raw tanks. And if the filtration units don't work, that water in the raw tank can't there'll be no water going into the filtrated tanks. And the water main, you cannot get those sponges back into Hardgate water main to pump them over and into the system. It's impossible the way the tanks are installed. The water will not go backwards from the raw tanks to the main.
Okay, so it follows from that then that the sponges would be a contamination risk if the filtration units, if there were a separate bypass put in place that went round the filtration units. In
Yes,
that hypothetical.
hypothetically, yes, but then you wouldn't have any pressure from the raw tanks because the raw tanks are filled up. Storage, there's no great height. There's only 1.5, 2 metres maybe height of water in the tank, so that'll give you a negligible pressure. It won't. The water wouldn't even leave that plant room going up the way. The only damage the sponges could do could be that they could get blocked in the pre-filter of the filtration unit, and that's it. It wouldn't go any further if it did go down the pipe. That's all it could do. And then your filtration unit wouldn't run.
Okay. No, I understand that. Moving back to page 295. Bypass again is mentioned at the top there in 95. But at 97 and 98, you're being asked what concerns there were at handover about temperature and movement within the water system. And you say that James Guthrie and you were concerned there was not enough flushing the water systems by facilities in Mercury.
Yeah.
And you raised this with Ian Powrie.
Mm-hmm.
Firstly, what were your concerns?
Well, if the system's not getting flushed regularly, and it's just sitting with no movement, the water can heat up, and we know the parameters that microbial growth, etc. So what happened was, and this is me going back to the meeting in 2000 for the 2015 risk assessment, the one that I said that I'd got a little bit confused. In that meeting with DMA Canyon, they'd brought up the fact about flushing, and I had asked Ian about the flushing records because I would have thought that that facilities and Brookfield would have records of the flushing of the system before handover, and that's how this came about how Jim and I were asking about flushing records and are they flushing? Can they prove that they're flushing?
Yep.
The system. That I don't remember. Ian said there was flushing records, but I don't remember seeing them.
Did it ever come back to you, that issue?
What ended up happening was we ended up hiring, and I can't remember the exact date for this, but we hired through an agency temporary workers to go around specific areas and flush the building. So they were working for the NHS. Ian delegated the task, and he picked the areas that were to be done. And I think, if I remember rightly, it would be the areas that they were just prior to when they were moving in. So if there was a ward moving in, that we sent the team up to flush it constantly for a couple of weeks, 3 weeks or so. I remember there was agency staff in doing that.
And just to help me follow this, flushing can be satisfactorily done simply by going round all the taps and running them for 2 minutes or so.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
You mentioned that this issue came to your attention because DMA had been talking about it.
If I can recall, that's how it came around. That's how I asked the question at that meeting.
Right, and if we can go by the earlier dates, that would have been at the end of 2014.
It would have been, yeah.
Can we date the concern that you and James Guthrie had raised from that?
That's probably where my answer came from, was that at that meeting that Jim and I were concerned. We just wanted to know if the hospital was getting flushed properly.
Okay, and so you raised that and you never found out anymore?
No, but we did end up and I can't remember when exactly, but we did end up, as I said, getting agency staff to flush various parts of the hospital, as well as Brookfield and facilities were still doing it, apparently.
Okay, thank you. And the question immediately above that, 96. The question's reasonably lengthy. What testing and maintenance protocols regimes were in place at Handover in 2015? What ought to be in place? And so on. Your answer there is not in my remit. Explain the answer again.
I wasn't involved as the AP for water at that time.
You're the AP for water now.
Yes.
Are you able to answer that question in retrospect? Or even parts of that question?
Yeah, well, I mean, we now we test all our sentinel points. We do according to the SHTMs, and we actually do more than we know what we do in the SHTMs. And we do our maintenance protocols would be checking the temperatures of the clarifiers, etc., checking the tanks, daily checks of the filtration units, etc., etc. I'd expected all of that to be done then.
Do you know if it was?
And I couldn't answer that question. I wasn't focused on the water at that time. My focus became on the water and only water predominantly in 2018.
I appreciate that. I guess the question I'm putting to you is that we don't know what the situation was as regards testing maintenance protocols at time of handover. And as you say, it never came to your attention.
There's only one thing I'd done, and again, Ian instructed this to be done, and it was, he gave me a list, and this is before I was on shifts. He gave me a list of areas that he wanted potable samples taken, which I got done, and they were put to the lab in Hillington. I think if I remember rightly, they were called Alcontrol, was the lab, and the results were sent to me and Ian, but Ian actioned. If there was any actions to be taken, Ian would do that, not me.
You did the sampling and some results came back, but you didn't find out more about it thereafter.
No. It was just it was the sampling. Ian would give me a list of where he wanted it sampled. I would then instruct some technicians of mine to go and take the samples. Then sometimes I took the samples in my car over to Hillington, and other times they were picked up to be sampled by Alcontrol.
Were you or are you familiar with sampling protocols, sampling practice?
I wasn't at the time of how strict the sampling protocols are now.
Were your technicians that you instructed, would they have been familiar with how to do samples?
We've done the sampling to the best of my knowledge as per, if I'm right, I think we asked DMA for on some instruction on how to, wearing gloves, how to take the sample, etc., etc. And that's what we followed.
The fact that happened, was that simply your own initiative?
No, that was Ian. No, Ian instructed that.
No, sorry, I appreciate that he instructed that sampling should be done.
Yes.
I'm interested about the techniques.
Yes, I think it was, we asked David for DMA, how would we go about doing this? And I can't remember Alcontrol supplied all the bottles for us. Because it's specific bottles, because the bottles have I don't know what it is, don't actually know what's in the bottle, but it keeps the bottle sterile. So they have to be sterile. The
reason I ask whether it was your initiative that brought about the instructions as to how to do it is because I'm trying to ask, did the instructions come with the instruction to do sampling at all? Did it come with instructions
I
to
can't
do it
remember.
this way?
I can't remember. I just remember Ian giving us a list, get sampling done in these areas, and then we asked our technicians, I think there was only 2 of them, to do the sampling for us. And we had a system of obviously marking up where they came from, etc. Where the sample was taken from.
I mean, putting the last 2 things I've been asking about the concerns about temperature and movement that you and Jim raised, and the sampling being done that you asked DMA, you say, to do it in a particular way. Was there any particular mechanism by which, mechanism is the wrong word, but was there any particular system by which would have brought about you raising these concerns or having sampling done in a particular way? Or did it depend entirely upon you and Jim having something in your mind on a particular day, or you asking questions, particular questions?
In my case, it was because of my past work at Inverclyde Royal, working with an L8 contractor, Legionella contractor.
But that depends upon it being you that was asked to do the sampling.
I think it was Jim and I were both asked to do the sampling, but I'd done most of the running around. I took the samples to Alcontrol, etc.
The other way of asking the question is, can you imagine, or do you know about scenarios where similar tasks might have been asked to people who didn't know what you knew?
No. That was a specific task to I'm sure it was to Jim and I, both of us, because of our backgrounds.
Okay, thank you. We probably have only 2 short sections to do. I've got a few questions, firstly, about taps. First one's a general one. It's about point of use filters. What are your views on those items? What do you think of them?
Taps first, or?
Point of use filters.
Oh, sorry. Point of use filters. My point of use filter will not allow any microbes through it at all. So if you have a system that is deemed that it's not wholesome water, etc., it will ensure that the water through the filter coming out the other end is fit for purpose, basically.
Are these good things, or do they bring risks with them?
Yeah, they are a good idea, but the maintenance of them, i.e. the cleaning regime of them, would raise an issue, because if you don't clean them in a certain way, which I don't know, its facilities would do this, you can get retrograde contamination on them.
You're not familiar with the actual requirements that would need to be done. That's task for
I don't deal. Clarkson deals with facilities when it comes to the any results coming back from filters which we deem to be retrograde contamination.
Okay, could you take a look at page 301? At the top, there's a particular question I'll just ask you to elaborate upon. The question was whether the point of use filters met water regulation requirements. Did they have an effective gap between the water level and the filter to prevent contamination? And you've said no.
Right. Yeah, they didn't. The gap should be for the overflow of the wash-in basin. So there's a gap. There should be an air gap by the bylaws.
Right, explain that to me bit by bit. I think I understand it, but I'd like you to explain it rather than me try to summarise it.
Okay, so your tap, when they install a tap, it's a certain height. There's a certain height from the wash-in basin, the rim of the wash-in basin.
Yep.
So if the wash-in basin fills up and your overflow's blocked, etc., and it starts spilling over, it means you've got an air gap between your tap and your wash-in basin, right? That means that you'll never be able to get any water from that wash-in basin back through into that tap, right? Problem with some of the point of use filters, they could have been below the rim of the wash-in basin. So when you put it on, that could be that much further down, which means then that that's your basin. So you could be slightly below the rim of the basin. If that was to fill up, you would get contamination. I believe that the point of use filters, you cannot get water back through them. They only go one way, but you would still have retrograde contamination on the outside of the filter.
Yep.
If that answers the question.
Perfect. Thank you. Did you see this?
I have noticed that some of the filters were below the rim of the wash-hand basin.
Moving on a little bit to page, will be 304. There's a section about taps. Now it starts off asking about horn taps, and I think I'm right in saying the full name of those is horn optitherm taps. Is that right? You familiar with these items?
Sorry? Oh, sorry.
This is a section about horn taps.
Yes.
And I believe the full name of these items is horn optitherm taps. You're familiar with these items?
Yes, I am.
Can you describe them, please?
A horn optitherm tap is a TMT, which is a thermal mixing tap. It has a hot and cold going in. The good thing about the optitherm tap is that you can flush the cold water on its own. So you can have a full cold water flow with no hot water mixture, which in my mind is a good idea, because some other tap manufacturers, it's very hard to get a flow of cold water on its own because of the way it works as a mixing tap. So the optitherms are very good at that.
But those taps bring problems of their own.
I wouldn't say that. I don't think they do, but that's my opinion.
Okay, the next, if we go over one page, 305, next question is about flow straighteners, and the question after that is about replacement of taps. Now, am I right that flow straighteners are part of the horn optitherm taps?
Yes, they are.
And you've described there, you've quoted the SHTM guidance about potential colonisation of flow straighteners.
Mm-hmm.
And the context here in these questions is about replacement of the horn taps. Are you able to answer the following? I'd like to know about maintenance and cleaning of the taps, the horn taps. Do you know when that started?
That was started by DMA Canyon. I can't remember the date.
Are you able to give us a year even?
Year and a half, 2 years ago maybe. I think this might be possibly into their second year.
Question 129 is a little bit different. It's about replacement with, which I take to be replacement of the horn taps with, as you say, the Armitage Shanks Martwick taps. Did you carry that out?
No.
Do you know when it was done?
No, I can't.
I asked for the date, and then I realised that the question itself offered a date, so I was drawing that to the witness's attention.
2019 is what you intended to ask
Yes,
about.
I'm not intended to correct that. We may have an answer actually to one of the questions. Could we have Bundle 18, Volume 2 up, please? Page 1423. And this is the 2022 DMA L8 report, is that right?
Sorry?
This is 2022 DMA L8 report.
That's what it says,
this version of it. Could we move on to page 1483, please? And if we look, the first big box is about microbiological sampling. And if we look at the very foot of what's on the screen at the moment, there is an action point, are suitable remedial actions and resamples taken out after out of specification sample results recorded. And the narrative that's given there is yes, all Markwick 21 plus taps were swapped out during January 2022 as the microbiological results indicated the taps were potentially the source of the out of specification results. This appears, as I read it, to be recording that Markwick taps themselves were replaced.
Yes.
At that date. Are you aware of this? Can you comment on this having happened?
I'm aware that the taps were replaced, and I think it was, they were replaced during the works in Ward 2A, the refurbishment works.
Okay.
By capital planning.
And perhaps more relevantly, in bundle 1, page 487, there's a minute here of an incident management team meeting about Serratia or Serratia colonisation. Firstly, are you aware of that particular incident outbreak?
I can't quite remember it, but I do remember it was in NICU, yeah.
Okay, you're recorded as being among the those present at this meeting.
Yep.
And if we go down to page 491, we'll see a drains report from you being recorded. So a report was received from Melville MacMillan regarding drains, written in response to an email, and then some jobs are recorded. The actions are firstly all taps replaced with Markwick thermostatic mixing taps. Do you recall this?
Yes, I do.
And was that across the board replacement of?
This was only in NICU.
Across the board within NICU.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yes, it was.
NICU being neonatal.
Yeah. Neonatal intensive care unit.
Okay, so you're aware of that. So we've got Horn being replaced with Markwick in wards 2A and 2B, and also in the neonatal. Right, to close this off, there's been a suggestion by another witness, Mr. Purden, to the effect that there was a widespread replacement of taps around January 2019 with Armitage Shanks Markwick taps. Sequential mixer taps, they're described as. Your Lordship may find that at question answer 120 of Mr. Purden's statement. Does that ring a bell for you?
No, unless Colin's talking about 2A, Ward 2A. The taps in NICU were only replaced once, because it was quite extensive works we done in NICU at that time. But I'm almost sure the Royal Hospital for Children 2A, the taps were replaced twice. I'm not 100% sure, but something tells me that they were replaced twice.
The specific point I'm interested in is, has there been widespread replacement of Horn with Markwick across the hospitals?
No, only certain areas.
The last question is a bit of a tangent, but 129 here is you're giving the indication that the last of these questions was the replacement related to dosing with chlorine dioxide? And you say not that I'm aware of.
Yes,
you see that.
Well, we do know that the chlorine dioxide does attack the Markwick taps, the internals, because the Markwick will not, ideal standard will not give you any guarantees if you put chemicals through their taps. In fact, most manufacturers won't give you a guarantee if you put chemicals through their taps. But we found a breakdown with Marwick taps, sorry. So I'm sure they changed them to Marwick 21 plus, and I can't quite remember the difference between the plus and the 21s.
Is that related to chlorine dioxide?
Yes, the chemical, when it started being dosed, yeah.
And in short, in summary, you may or may not wish to elaborate on this, but the basic point is chlorine dioxide can be corrosive of materials.
To only certain materials, I would say. I'm not an expert, but to only certain materials, and maybe within the makeup of that tap, it has that material. That's when it will break down.
Okay, there was a chlorine dioxide programme started around, I've got noted, around January 2019.
Mm-hmm.
You're aware of that?
I am.
Were you involved in it?
I was only involved to facilitate the installation of the Alpha units and the Bravo units within the hospital. I took directions from Ian Powrie regarding where they were getting fitted and
What are the Alpha and the Bravo units?
so the chlorine dioxide units, there's units in the basement on one side of the tank room which goes directly into the filtration tanks. When they come out of the filtration tanks, they are measured electronically for the level of chlorine dioxide. If, per se, the chlorine dioxide isn't high enough, the dosing system will kick in, right, which feeds the tanks. If the tank dosing system fails, there's what we call the Alpha units. Now, the Alpha units are after the filtration tanks. They can be turned on to safely dose the hospital. If there's an issue with the dosing system before the filtration tanks. The Bravo units are smaller units, and they're divided up through the hospital in the plant rooms. Now, if the Alpha units break down, we've got the Beta units that we can use on certain legs in the hospital. So we've basically got 3 points of redundancy. That's what the Alpha and the Beta are in the system to dose chlorine dioxide.
And there are a lot of these units.
Yes.
And that was the extent of your involvement, was fitting these or having them fitted?
Yes, I was managing the installation of them through it was Livingston Mechanical were installing the units. Scott Mast were the manufacturer.
Given that you're an authorised person for water by then, so you're responsible for management of the water system, might you have expected to be involved a bit more in the chlorine dioxide programme?
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't have been involved in the decision making for that, for the installation, for choosing these units, etc. Whatever. No, I wasn't involved in that. If you think, should I have been?
That's the question.
Sorry.
Do you think you should have been?
Possibly. It was a project run by Ian.
I've only got one last set of questions for you, I think. They're on a different subject entirely. It's to do with your ventilation functions that I haven't really touched on very much. But you're aware of an issue regarding pigeons in the premises?
Yes, yeah, after being told about it, yeah.
Right, I'll ask you to take a look, please, at some pictures. We've got bundle 12, page 1236. Now, it's an email by one, I shan't read it out, but it's an email by one of the doctors warning about, or relating to ventilation and relating to a particular infection, cryptococcus. Are you familiar with that issue?
Yes, yes.
The paragraph I'm interested here is just below halfway, section 3.4.5. states that, thank you, states that the plant room has been categorically ruled out. It's not possible to categorically rule out any hypothesis on a retrospective basis. There's a strong epidemiological link to the plant room, and given the emergence of new photographs just last week taken in November, which show contamination with bird feces and dead birds, this investigation is not concluded. Chair of the group has in fact arranged to revisit the plant room in light of this new evidence. It is of huge concern that these photographs and a subsequent set from the first week in December were not shared with the IMT at the time or the expert advisory group until now. Pictures and email below. And if we do go below down to page 1238, we see a series of pictures. There's perhaps not very much in the first one, but on the next page, you'll see there evidence of bird droppings. Yes. The page after that, more of the same, would you agree?
Yes.
And again, likely the same.
Yes.
Next page, please. Seems to be the same photograph. And the page after that, not bird droppings this time, but a dead bird.
Yes.
Did you see anything like this?
I seen one day, don't ask me when, because I can't remember, but I was walking through plant room 41 and it was on the far side, as I call it, the racetrack. And I was walking through the plant room, I can't remember, I was going to check, and I seen pigeon droppings. There's a double door that takes you across the plant room. You go outside, takes you into the other side of the plant room, and I seen bird droppings there, and I heard a noise, and there was a gap. There was a gap in the fabric of the building, and I looked down and I looked through, and all I could see was I could actually see to outside. So when I then went outside, and I just turned to my left as I went through the door and looked, and I could see the gap. So the fabric, whoever had put the outer fabric on, hadn't sealed it up properly. That's all I remember. And the rest, those pictures were just what I've seen in the past from other colleagues telling me.
Okay, so evidently there was a route in.
There was definitely a route in, yeah.
The route was being used by the evidence.
And I can't remember who I reported that right away. But I cannot remember who I reported it to.
Right, well in that case actually, that's maybe the answer. It ties up in some ways. In Bundle 24, Volume 1. First document here starts at page 7 and is described in the table, perhaps not in the page itself, but it's a table of QEH jobs 2015 to 2021. I'm interested in page 16. Page 16, please. If we look at maybe 8 lines from the bottom, 1406, 2018. 829, which I assume is time in the morning. Plant room 31, main hospital. Pigeon, Mel. Might that have been you?
That's me. I remember that.
Right, okay. Is that the incident you were talking about?
No.
No, that's something else.
That's not the same plant room.
You said 41. This is 31. I was thinking that might be close enough.
Yeah, I said 41 when I seen the gap in the building.
Okay.
I remember this. But so I seen that, and I'm sure I called one of the secretaries, our secretary, and Liz would have phoned GP Environment and said, there's a dead pigeon, plant room 31. It wasn't in plant room 31. It was actually outside the building in plant room, outside to the right of plant room 31, where the MRI chillers are. And I've walked back, there's a big piece of glass, and you walk past, I was heading towards plant room 32, I think, and I just turned and I noticed there was a dead pigeon line. So I'm sure I phoned Liz and said, Liz, could you get GP Environmental? There's a dead pigeon line up in level outside plant room 31. But it's been written down as plant room 31. It definitely wasn't in plant room 31.
Outside plant room 31.
Outside plant room 31.
What was your concern?
Nothing, it's a dead pigeon. I know, it was just a dead pigeon. I don't know how it got there. But it was open to outside.
Yeah.
There was no netting or anything up at that point, at that time, to stop them.
You said it was near items of equipment. I didn't take a note of what they were.
MRI chillers.
What are they?
They're just big chilling units that cool down the MRI scanners. The MRI scanners heat up, but they need to be cooled down. It's the gas that's in them needs to be cooled. If you don't cool the gas down, they'll expand and they blow off, and then the scanner becomes inoperable. So it's a chilled unit that sends chilled water down in a loop to keep the MRI scanner cool for operation. There's 4 of them on that roof.
And am I right in saying, in picking you up, that you didn't see any particular concern from the dead pigeon, except that it was a dead pigeon?
Yeah, there was no concern. I didn't have any concern. It was just a dead pigeon. It could have, I don't know how it got there.
Okay. No, I don't have any further questions for you at this point.
What I need to do now is just check with the room as to whether there's any further questions for you, Mr. MacMillan. So what I'll do is ask you to return to the witness room, and we should be able to find out within the next 10 minutes whether there are any other questions or no further questions. Okay. So if Mr. MacMillan could go to the witness room, please.
Thank you.
Is that
Ms. McKeever?
Some very short questions more.
Right. Mr. MacMillan, just maybe a few more questions.
The first one relates to air handling units. And I haven't asked you a great deal about your ventilation work, but air handling units in wards 2A and 2B. Did you ever do maintenance on those?
No, I didn't.
Did you instruct maintenance on them?
If there's any work on those air handling units, it would have been on emergency breakdowns, etc.
Can you recall?
No,
events?
there's that many air handling units. Maybe the only thing I could maybe think on is if they went off on a frost start. A lot of them go off in frost start in the winter because of the position that the intake grills are. And it would be, again, BMS, check the system, write down the ones that have went off, and then instruct a technician to go and turn them back on again.
Specific question that I would have had for you would have been, have you done maintenance in the air handling units in 2A and 2B? Did you ever see water in those units?
No, I never seen, no.
Okay. Second question relates to the sampling that you spoke about that Ian Powrie had directed you to do. I didn't ask you, and perhaps I should have done, where was that sampling?
It was around both hospitals in various locations that Ian had instructed me to take from. I can't remember the actual location. I can't remember every single room, etc.
Were there a lot of sampling to be done?
There was quite a lot, yeah.
Right. Can you estimate a number?
I honestly can't remember. I could fill my car up with the sample bottles, to tell you the truth. I honestly don't know. The records from Alcontrol would be able to tell you how many samples were taken.
If you can remember, would it have been hundreds? Would it have been less than hundreds?
No, probably, yeah, it would be about 100, maybe more than 100.
Okay, and you did also say that the results came back to you and to Ian Powrie.
Yes.
And it was him that actioned them.
Yes.
This was what you said.
Yes, because I was too busy with other stuff.
But do you recall whether any of the results were of concern, were out of specification?
I didn't actually look at them, to tell you the truth. And I don't remember. I mean, now when I look back, because I have them, I have the results because I kept them. I've got them on my pen stick, and if you look through them, you can see that there were some out of specs, but nothing of any great significance. But I can't remember, to tell you the truth.
Last question is a general one about when you became the authorised person for water. At that time, did you consider the water system to be in a state of compliance?
When I first started in 2018,
Yes.
it took me a while to get my head round what actual work had been done, i.e., maintenance, PPMs, etc.
Of course.
And we struggled because of manpower I would say we struggled because of manpower to complete all the tasks. So I decided, I'm sure Kerr as well was involved with me, and we decided to ask DMA to assist us with various tasks. One of the tasks, for example, would be the shower heads and hoses, which get cleaned, but all the records aren't there for that because it was too much of an onerous task to do. So we decided to basically go to a company called Dupal and buy throwaway hoses and shower heads. And they have a colour code system for every 3 months. So that's what we use now. And we've used that ever since 2019, I take it, I believe. It means that we can install them, leave them for 3 months and take them out and dispose of them. They get sent back to Dupal and they reuse them again. Well, they recycle them, sorry.
Yeah, no, I follow that, but my question was simpler than that really, which was just if you imagine a snapshot of the system at the time that you became AP for water, would that be a snapshot of a compliant system or a non-compliant system?
In my mind, the system was working, but you need to delve deeper to make that decision or that comment to say it wasn't compliant. You know, it wasn't compliant, and that some of the maintenance wasn't getting done. Yes, I agree, but to say that the system wasn't safe you need to look deeper into it than that.
Well, you did have, obviously you will have looked deeper on it over the years since you took over as AP for Water. Did you ever come to a view that the system wasn't safe?
Sorry, did I?
Did you ever come to a view during that time that we're dealing with an unsafe system?
No, I didn't, no.
Okay, that's no further questions, Lord. Thank you.
Do I take it that Mr. McKeever has accurately picked up questions he was asked to ask? Thank you. Mr. MacMillan, that is now the end of your evidence. Thank you very much for coming and giving the oral evidence today, but thank you also for the probably quite considerable amount of work done in preparing the written statement. So I'm very grateful for both your attendance and your preparatory work. But as I say, you're now free to go. And perhaps.
Thank you.
Now, Ms. McKeever, my understanding is that Mr. McIntosh is taking one witness tomorrow, and that's Miss Imrie.
I believe so.
All right. Well, and I wish you a good afternoon, and we'll see each other tomorrow at 10. Thank you.